of what is happening in and around southeast Louisiana after. So we are now on Airline Highway, leaving the area from what used to be the Louis Armstrong International Airport, the old airport, and we are headed towards the city of New Orleans. But we also are going to go in multiple areas, and what we're trying to do is for people who are evacuated and even for people who are stuck at home, who did not evacuate, we're trying to give you a perspective of what's going on outside, because it can be very isolating when you are stuck at home during an evacuation. You may not have the ability to get around and understand the amount of damage here. And currently we're on Airline Highway, and the damage isn't substantial in terms of downed power lines and trees. Obviously there's not many trees on this side of Airline Highway. But we are having, as everybody is experiencing here who decided to stay or could not leave, a lack of electricity. And anytime that we're coming up on intersections, we do have to negotiate those intersections very carefully, because as we had mentioned before, as we were trying to get down to Houma, we couldn't get down to Houma because of some standing water. We didn't feel that it was going to be safe getting down and then getting back, because that area was more heavily impacted by Hurricane Ida than the areas here in the metro area, the Kenner, Metairie, New Orleans area. But anybody who lives here understands that when you are driving on a good day anywhere in Metairie, JP, and especially in New Orleans sometimes, negotiating those intersections can be very hazardous, because often some folks just don't pay attention and don't honor the law that is written for four-way traffic stops. But that is the big question on many people's minds this day after Hurricane Ida, and that is when power is going to be restored. And just a heads up here for everybody, we may run into some areas that the video may be poor, just because the system here in the Mobile Forecast Center relies on multiple carriers. AT&T, I understand, is trying to come back online, but it may be unreliable in some spots. So if you do lose us, if you can't hear us at certain points, it may be because of the cell service, so we do apologize for that. But that is the situation after a major hurricane makes landfall in an area here. And also a heads up, we also may be shifting and going and broadcasting for television as well. So there may be points that I may be repeating myself, and then you'll hear me speaking to other people. That is us communicating with the folks back at the television station who are also broadcasting at this point. So if you're joining us digitally, if you're evacuated, we hope that you are safe. We hope that your family is safe. And what we're trying to do, we know and we understand the need for people to see their neighborhoods, see their homes. We're going to try our best as much as possible to go around and show some areas that may be kind of landmarks, so you have a point of view and at least a baseline of what's happening and what has happened in terms of damage. And the ability that we have in this Mobile Forecast Center is the ability for the camera to kind of swivel around as we're moving. It may be disorienting for some people, but let's take a look here. This is near the Jefferson Performing Arts Center off of Airline, and we have an army of line trucks. That is a positive sign. That is also one of the bigger questions here for people.
Tom, go ahead and talk.
Okay, and I'm just going to shift over to TV here. Guys, I'm sorry for here. We were broadcasting digitally here, and we are just joining you from the Mobile Forecast Center. And right now we're just off of Airline Highway. And I know the big question that many people have is, when is the power going back? And when is it coming back on? This is a positive sign in seeing the amount of line trucks lined up here near the Jefferson Performing Arts Center off the Airline Highway. They are ready to go, it appears, but you know, there's going to be a period of time that they're going to have to mobilize and really deploy. But I will say it is very crowded right now for the day after a major hurricane on Airline Highway. You know, there has been multiple kind of heeds and kind of pleas from parish officials to stay where you are, and excuse me as I kind of maneuver the camera as best as I can as I speak, and I apologize for that. I'm not a pro at this. But we've heard many pleas from parish officials, city officials to stay off the roads and to stay where you are as emergency responders and crews work to clear the roads. I can say that as we've been traveling all through today, we've went down Highway 90, tried to make our way down to Houma, and traveled a good way from New Orleans through Jefferson Parish. The roads are very clear at this point. That's not necessarily an invitation for people to come out and start traveling because at this point there is very little services in terms of anything, gas, grocery stores, and for all you football fans out there, that's the Saints facility. The goalposts fell down here. But we're just trying to get and give people a sense of what's happened since the storm here. And it is pretty remarkable right now that, considering all the wind that we had last night, and just from our travels last night into today, a considerable amount of debris has been removed off of the streets, off the main thoroughfares in Orleans and Jefferson Parish. And I did hear both of you all talk about the situation with the I-10 flooding as we were coming eastbound on I-10 last night. And that we can certainly say has been cleared. That is also another positive sign. And as we were encountering last night the water that was in that area near the City Park Metairie Road exit, there was a car that was stranded, but as we went out, I got out of the car to make sure that there was no one in that car. There was another car that had pulled aside, and I made sure and I asked the person, was there another driver in the car that was stranded? And the person who was in the passenger side of that particular car said he was the driver. So and again, I can only go off from what I understood to be the situation at that point. The person in the passenger side of that vehicle said that he was the driver of the stranded car, so I can only take them for their word at this point, because I understand that you were both discussing the possibility of, and apparently there is a confirmed death from a drowning near that area. We did see that car, one particular car at that moment, but in driving near that area today, there were several stranded cars pulled to the side of that same area last night that we had driven and then had to pull around. But in driving today, there were several vehicles that were abandoned on that side. So it's hard to say if that death was related to any of the vehicles that were there. But you know, again, this is just a day after landfall, so there's still more to be discovered there. But we also can report that as we were coming down off of I-10, going down into the areas of Houma, into Highway 90 and heading west along St. Charles Parish and heading towards Houma, there was a considerable amount of water that had pooled on the side of Highway 90, and as we turned around because we couldn't navigate and we didn't feel safe navigating there, and now we're heading towards the Harahan area, just to kind of orient everybody, there was a considerable amount of water along Highway 90 in certain parts on both sides, and some of those images are very impressive. I know that we have several crews down there at this point, but from what we saw, it was just, yeah, let's head down to Clearview and give people an idea of what's happening down there, Jeff. And I apologize because I'm trying to have multiple conversations with everybody here, but you know, this is a main shopping area for many folks right now. It's clear sailing for the most part in terms of just debris on the road. Again, the crews in JP and also Orleans, particularly along the main thoroughfares, the Claiborne, St. Charles Avenue, Carrollton Avenue, those areas have been very much cleared of the heavy debris that we saw last night. Last night was a bit treacherous because A, it was dark, but also B, there was a tremendous amount of debris from tree limbs and other projectiles and objects that were in people's yards. Most of that has been cleared. A lot of people have been out and about today, and what I've seen, just kind of trying to clear as much as they can from their yards. And again, I believe and I'd imagine that most of the parish officials that have been speaking today have urged people to be very, very, very careful in what they're doing, because some of the aftermath and the days after the storm, this is when accidents happen with carbon monoxide poisonings and so on and so forth, with generators and people falling off ladders. So in doing so, please be careful, because again, this could be a little disorienting for people, and also it might give you a false sense of, oh, everything's fine. Just understand that there's no traffic signals at this point. On a good day, many people can kind of run into areas where you run into those drivers that don't really know what they're doing at four-way stops, and you've been there where you always have to give it a beat before you cross that intersection. Now is the time to practice safe driving if you're out and about. But again, parish officials, city officials have been urging people not to be on the road at this point. And this is what we're seeing throughout so much so far. There has been a good amount of traffic everywhere that we've gone. But again, this is something that I don't want people to kind of get a false sense of security that everything is okay. But for the most part here on the main thoroughfares, most of the areas are cleared. On the side streets in most of the areas of the parishes in Orleans, and also going down further in St. Charles Parish too, there is a substantial amount of damage when you get off the main thoroughfares. Obviously, emergency response and also work crews will do their best and also put their primary focus right now to clear the main thoroughfares, so in case there's an emergency, those emergency vehicles and the personnel can get onto the main thoroughfares and then get to where they need to be. So that will be the main priority. So those side streets, those secondary streets, those secondary surface streets are going to be a little bit more clogged with some of the debris. But here, as we're coming off of Clearview here, I believe we're on Mounds right now. Is that right, Jeff? I believe we're on Mounds, yeah. As you can see, I mean, there's more debris on this side here as you get off on the main streets. These side streets are going to be a little bit more difficult to navigate, and this is sort of emblematic for what you'll see certainly uptown in New Orleans too, because much to the chagrin of everybody that's been living in New Orleans, there's been a vast amount of road construction there. That is now kind of compounded with some of the debris that Hurricane Ida kind of just threw all over the place. So just if you are out and about, just make sure that you're very careful in traversing and traveling around those streets, because you've had a lot of construction debris that was out there, construction equipment. That's going to limit your access to some of those secondary streets, but now you're also dealing with some of the debris that Hurricane Ida has left too. So we are here now, we are on digital too, and what we're trying to do in the Mobile Forecast Center is to just roll around and give people a sense of what's happening, because we understand that, and we've all been there, that when you are in a situation where you're either evacuated or you're isolated, and we've kind of experienced that during COVID. It looks like we're going to get cut off here, Jeff. We'll probably hang a right. When you're isolated, you kind of just are in your own space and in your own mental state as well, and you don't really get a good grasp of what's happening. What we're trying to do, and certainly for people who are displaced, we want to show some of those areas that you may be familiar with, just to kind of, so that you have a baseline to judge of what's happening and what has happened since Hurricane Ida. We're going to pull over here just a second. I'm going to pan over to take a look at that. Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of sporadic, certainly, Katie, and there didn't seem to be a whole lot of rhyme or reason, but certainly when we got off of 10 and I-10 and that 310 area onto Highway 90, you can see a fairly clear path of where the storm went in terms of the tree damage. But it is quite sporadic, and in some parts, again, this is just, we're roughly a day or a little bit more than 24 hours after landfall from Hurricane Ida, perhaps even less. Some of the areas, the crews have been remarkably fast in clearing. So, if there weren't a lack of traffic signals at this point, you might be mistaken and figure it's like, wow, this is a great traffic day on Veterans and it's easy sailing. Because for the most part, it's fairly clear. But then you'll look to the side and also to the areas of the shops and the grocery stores. We drove by Zapardo's, Dorinac's, Rouse's. All of those areas are now closed. And there was a good amount of water pooling along Veterans in the parking lots last night. But all of that now is clear. But as you kind of turn around and we're coming up, you can see some of the light poles and the utility poles is leaning here. And this is what you'll see, and certainly be careful, because there are times that as we've traveled, you'll see as you're coming up here, and Jeff, if you slow down, you see that these hanging poles, the hanging wires from the poles here, people should be very careful, because some of the side streets and the less traveled streets, there are a lot of poles that are leaning, so now the wires are also leaning too. We certainly obviously don't have a whole lot of power, but don't want to run the risk of into any wires right now, and then complicating your life more with any damage to your car and to yourself. But to your point, Katie, it is sometimes sporadic. It's almost ad hoc how the storm kind of just came and kind of unleashed. Seem okay and seem relatively untouched, and then you'll see a large tree crashed onto a home, which is something that we certainly saw down in the areas of St. Charles as we were traveling down there today. We couldn't really get all the way through to Homa. We were probably, if everybody's familiar, we were probably past Gauche, going down into, and we passed Destrehan. But as we were kind of getting closer and going further west on 90, we started running into a good amount of water, and we just didn't feel safe that if we were going any further, that on the way back we wouldn't encounter more water. And as great as this mobile forecast center is, it's not as high sitting as other SUVs, so we didn't feel safe. But that area, as we were heading 90 we were heading east on 90, and I can't quite place it right now, but there was just a smattering of mobile homes, large trees that were uprooted. There was Frank's Lounge on Highway 90 that was just water. And it's those images, I think, that at times when you see something that most people would remember when they drive on Highway 90, and they understand, oh, that's Frank's Lounge, but it's just surrounded with water and empty. And it's one of those kind of emblematic pictures and images of what a storm can do, that a place that used to be so full of traffic and people is now just surrounded by water. And those are the images that kind of stick out in my mind. And there was a lady just with her white shrimp boots on. It looked like her mobile home, and there was water all over, and she was just sitting looking at it. And it's those situations and those images that kind of last with you. I mean, certainly it's tough, because as you've covered storms, both of you as well, it's just, you get to see the amount of damage, but time and time again, if you start seeing the same images, for a lack of better terms, you kind of almost become desensitized to it. But when you kind of look at the humanity behind those scenes and understand the human impact, that woman was looking at her home and wondering what was going to happen beyond that, it reminds you that behind all of these images that we're seeing, somebody's going to have to clean that up, or somebody is evacuated and doesn't know what's happening with their property or their business, and they're worried. And as you probably heard the mayor today, she said now is not the time to come back. And that's the tough part, is that as we're showing these images, we don't necessarily want to reinforce this idea that everything's okay and everything's clear, you can come back. Just keep in mind that as you're seeing all these stores, they're not open. And there have been very few gas stations that are open, and the ones that are starting to see lines around the corner. And that's what we saw as we headed down towards Homa as well. There was only probably one or two, I think, right, Jeff, that we probably saw gas stations that were open, and it was just line after line. And that is part of the challenge, and part of really the misery of staying behind at times, is that we don't have the resources, and the very few places that do have the resources, such as gasoline at this point, are going to be really strapped for staff, but also they have a limited amount of that resource as well, and people really want it. Well, we couldn't quite get there too, Katie, because I-10 and 310 are cut off. If you're going on 10 westbound, you're going to be diverted, and we have to take the back way around all the way from 90 across the west bank. So as we were trying to get to Destrehan, we had to turn around, actually. So we'll try to get there as much as we can today. But again, we're starting on this end in Jefferson Parish, and we're hoping that we can kind of cut through Orleans, make our way back along US 90, go west again, and then try to get back down there. But we tried to go initially on I-10 down to 310, but that we got cut off because apparently that area is cut off and being blocked by authorities at this point, because there must be a vast amount of debris or water just covering that area right now. It is good news, and the good news here too is that for now, what we're seeing is that the people that are able to safely do it, people are picking up, and we see a good amount of neighbors helping each other right now. And as we're turning down into this area, I think we're headed towards we're trying to get to River Ridge eventually, but we're starting to see some damage here. And again, yeah. Yeah. We're at River Ridge now, and we'll be here all day, Katie. Okay, everybody, we are now back on the... Okay.
I don't know where to go now.
Okay, everybody, we are kind of pull off and put on our television hat for broadcasting here, but we just pulled up into River Ridge, and we're turning around trying to figure out how we can get into this side, at least on this side, off because of that massive utility pole. It's a dead end on that side of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're just joining us here, if you've been listening to me drone on WWL-TV, we're in Harahan. We just tried to get into River Ridge, and we're blocked off, at least at that entrance here. Trying to orient myself. I apologize, I'm not very familiar with this part of Jefferson Parish, but if I can, I'll see some street signs, and if you're evacuated or if you are here and you're wondering how your property is doing, we're trying our best to kind of give people a cross-section, a sample of what's happening and what has happened in terms of tree damage and down trees and debris. And we're on Gennaro Street, apparently. And so far, most of the debris here seems like it's been cleared. If you can take a look as I'm swinging the camera around, the trees that seem to have been on the road here have been kind of removed and pushed to the side. Excuse me here as I maneuver the camera and also try to talk. Sometimes it sounds easier said than done. And the damage can be sporadic sometimes. You'll see some clear roads and clear streets, and then you'll see something like this above us here. Just a tree being precariously held up by some wires. And we're going to slow down just to make sure that we can pass safely, which we are. And if you were listening earlier, as I was mentioning to some of the folks on the broadcast side, that for the most part, the main thoroughfares in Jefferson Parish and Orleans And even in some of the heavier affected areas of St. Charles Parish, those main thoroughfares of US 90, St. Charles Avenue, Carrollton Avenue, Veterans Boulevard, those areas are really pretty much clear of debris at this point. That was not the case last night, so it's a testament to how quickly some of the road crews have been working to make sure that the main roads are cleared, and that's really to the benefit of the first responders who have to get to emergencies at this point, if there are going to be any. Can we get into there? Yeah. And now we're heading over into River Ridge, and from what we understand, River Ridge did sustain some substantial damage from wind damage here. And take a look to the right. You can see this down tree, uprooted tree, or split tree, I suppose. And it was very much a wind-driven event last night, for sure. But as you can see, some of these trees and some of the limbs have been already cut up and piled up. The downside right now is that there is no power unless people are pre-prepared with their own generators. There is no power basically for the entire region in southeast Louisiana. The big question is, when is that power going to come back on? And the estimates have not been clear, but they have not indicated that it's going to be anytime soon. I believe that many of the estimates so far have been in weeks, not days. So although this may be deceptive in seeing relatively clear roads, it is not normal at all, because there's very few stores that are open, and certainly the gas stations are closed, and the ones that are open are just right now seeing a good amount of people in lines waiting to get gas. So gas is very much a premium at this point. And just a heads up to everybody who's joining us on digital, there may be points that honestly I believe you probably don't enjoy listening to me droning on, so we may just cut the mic for a little bit. And for those who are interested in kind of seeing and understanding and trying to get a glimpse of their neighborhood, if you're in the River Ridge area, if you live in these neighborhoods, what we're trying to do is just to give you a visual of how things are. So hopefully some of these areas are familiar to you, and sometimes you don't need somebody who doesn't necessarily live in your area or your neighborhood to speculate on what's going on, but sometimes it's better just to have the pictures speak for themselves. And we are still in the River Ridge area here, and for the most part some of the homes are pretty much clear, but take a look at some of the down trees as we're passing by. We're going to swing around here, and we're approaching the levee. And coming around here, you'll see a tree that's toppled onto the levee there. Fortunate for the house that it didn't topple on the other side. You see a man working on his roof right here. Stop here for a second, Jeff. Okay, maybe not. Never mind.
Sorry.
No worries. We're moving on. And for the most part, this is kind of indicative, at least in Jefferson Parish so far, and in parts of Orleans as well. Most of the yards have been cleared. If people did remain and shelter in place, we've seen many of the yards that had debris and garbage as well has been, for the most part, picked up and stacked as well. A testament, since I'd imagine many folks don't have anything better to do. But you are seeing people out and about taking their debris and stacking it already. And we have seen, watch out for this tree, that branch right up there, Jeff, if you see it. Yeah. You'll encounter things like these, though. And it's part of the hazard right now as people move around. Just be careful if you are going to be traveling around. There really isn't many places that you can go because stores aren't really open at all. And gas stations are also very packed at this point. And if you're just joining us, everyone, we did a couple of turnarounds there and U-turns. We were trying to see damage as much as we can, but you're probably seeing it here too a little bit on Jefferson Highway as we head towards the West Bank. We want to head over to the West Bank because I don't think we've, at least for this crew, we haven't personally had a good grasp on what Hurricane Ida did in the West Bank in Jefferson and Orleans parishes. And so that's our destination right now. We are traveling on Jefferson Highway, US 90, headed towards the West Bank. Eventually, we're trying to make our way to the Huey P. Long Bridge, which will get us to the West Bank as we're coming from the East Bank of the river. And as we travel, when we do see some significant damage, we will stop and, as much as we can, get some images for that and relay that to you. But if you are just joining us on the streaming platforms on YouTube, Facebook, and WWL-TV and other streaming platforms, we welcome you. We hope that you're in good spirits. We hope you're safe wherever you are, whether you are evacuated or whether you to shelter in place and ride out the storm. We hope that you are okay this day after Hurricane Ida. I'm Tan Trung, and despite Jeff Hackett's opposition, I just named him as our navigator and our driver here. That is full disclosure. Those are the people that you're dealing with today on this ride. And as I've been hearing some of the press conferences, at least so far, the confirmed death toll, at least from Hurricane Ida, for now, has been 2, from what I understand. But as the governor had mentioned earlier today, it is usually the days after the storm when people are cleaning up their property, getting on ladders, using heavy equipment and generators, that sometimes the death toll tends to increase. And let's take a look at that pole right there as we're on Jefferson Highway. And you'll see this throughout the area right now, especially as you're traveling to the more heavily impacted zones, and that's probably to the southwest, as we've been describing. That those areas are pretty much ground zero. Terrebonne, Lafourche, St. Charles Parish really took the brunt of the storm. But even on this side, on the more northern parts of Jefferson Parish, Kenner and Metairie, they too had a good amount of wind damage. And the twisted and leaning poles usually are your indicator that the storm had made its way through here. On the other side, let me see here. That's okay. Keep going, Jeff. I'm sorry. And I'll apologize in advance because sometimes I'll have to speak with Jeff and also speak with folks back at the television station. So if you hear me discussing anything, it's most likely between those two parties. Don't mean to be rude. But as I was mentioning before, I certainly don't want to give people the false sense of security that everything's okay at this point. Even though you do see a good amount of traffic moving out and about right now, this is something that local officials have urged against, is people getting and moving when there's limited amount of traffic signals, virtually no traffic signals that we've seen, but also with some debris still left on the roads as well as some down power lines. They're urging people just to, for the time being, to stay where they are so they can get some of the roads clear. And the biggest issue for all of us right now is to have those utility companies move in with whatever level of help that they can get from local or state and federal governments to get the power grid back up and running. That is going to be the biggest issue for everyone at this point. Because if you are considering coming back, what parish officials are urging, at least the city of New Orleans, is don't come back now because there's not a good amount of resources to welcome you back. That is in the way of food, stores. Jeff's pulling over here to, yeah, take a look at this here. And it's sometimes in your travels, we just see certain images here, and that's a difficult part too, is sometimes as we're driving we may not catch it. But this is off Jefferson Highway at this point. It looks like it's probably an old shopping or old strip mall here. But that is a good indicator of the power of Ida here. This building, this brick building, just now exposed on one side. All right, Jeff. And we're going to get back on Jefferson Highway now.
Hear that?
Now we're headed back onto Jefferson Highway, trying to get to the Huey P. Long so we can get to the West Bank. And in a minute we'll have to rejoin the television side of things. So for now I'm just going to place the microphone down for a minute, and when I do come back on, it'll be broadcasting, or will be broadcasting on the television side. Sharice, Katie, we are now driving along Jefferson Highway heading towards the West Bank, because at least for this crew we haven't had a firm grasp of what's been happening and what has happened over on the West Bank. But take a look at some of the leaning utility poles here on Jefferson Highway, and this is some of the precarious situations that you'll see. So as people are kind of considering whether to get out and start driving, just understand that conditions are less than prime at this point. Obviously, after this short time after Hurricane Ida made landfall, the challenging part for us here is that as we're going here, we also don't want to give people the false sense of security, and it can be deceptive as we're moving. It just seems like everything's wide open and you can go. We don't want to give people that idea that it's time just to kind of in here and start taking the damage for themselves, and certainly for people who are evacuated. This is something that we also are urging, and certainly parish officials are urging too, that now is not the time to come back. I mean, we are seeing some gas stations trying to get back up online, but that is few and far between at this point. We're making our way towards the Huey P. Long Bridge, and Jeff is going to pull over here for a second. And let me swing the camera over here on the Mobile Forecast Center. Jeff, do you want to handle that right there? I think you spotted it better than I can. These are just some of the areas and some of the images that we'll see as we're driving along. And sometimes, at the speeds that we're going, sometimes we might just pass it. But take a look at some of the wind and the power of the wind from the storm, just knocking some of the trailers off of these trucks here. And we just passed a brick building just a short while ago that basically just had all of its internal parts just kind of exposed at this point, because there's this one facade of the wall just blown out from the storm. But then, we're coming back here, and Katie, you mentioned it before, that it just seems like it's kind of a mishmash of damage, that you'll see clear areas and then all of a sudden you'll get up to a point where you have a tremendous amount of tree damage. We did leave the River Ridge area just a short while ago, and it was remarkably clear at this point. There was a good amount of tree debris that had already been cut up and then piled up into homes as well. On the right, we're just passing Walmart here, and it seems like there's some security vehicles there, and hopefully they're getting to a point where as many people would want to anticipate, and hoping for resources and some more supplies that they get up and running. But that might be a long time away at this point. Again, we are traveling on Jefferson Highway, trying to make our way to the Huey P. Long Bridge. We're trying to get over to the West Bank, because from what we understand, some of the areas in Harvey and Belchase, Gretna, and also Algiers suffered some heavy damage, and we're trying our best to get to those points where people have been requesting us to get to. It is difficult. We're only one unit, but we understand that people just want to see how their neighborhoods are doing, how their homes are doing, most importantly. But as we're moving along here, we have been broadcasting digitally on some of those platforms, the streaming platforms of YouTube and Facebook. And as we're doing so, we're getting requests from people asking us to go to certain neighborhoods, and as much as we can, we're just trying to give people a cross-section of these areas right now. We might not get to every neighborhood, but I think that as we're traveling main thoroughfares, we'll try to pan right to give people a sense, and maybe just understanding that, okay, judging from St. Charles Avenue or Carrollton Avenue or Veterans Boulevard, this is what it looks like. And if we can pan over, maybe we can kind of show the side streets as well. But that's our mission today, is just to kind of give people a sense of what has happened roughly a day after Hurricane Ida. Right now we're coming across the Huey P. Long Bridge, and we're heading towards the West Bank. And as we're coming over the bridge here, sure, it'll just take us a little while to get there, but again, what we're trying to do as much as we can is, and you'll excuse me here as I try to maneuver the camera. I'm not the best at this. I'm not the best at many things, but oh, absolutely, Katie. And just you may have seen this woman to our right here that we just passed here. You look a little bit beyond the surface of things here, and when you go by and see some of the residential areas, and you understand, that you see families just sitting outside waiting for the power to come back on. In every home, in every neighborhood that we're traveling through, we're seeing people just waiting, after they cleared their debris, and they've, more importantly right now, for people that can get to the bridges, it might to kind of take an assessment and understand what you want to do with the contents of your fridge. But after they've done that, there isn't much to do, unless you have a generator. Most people are sitting outside trying to stay cool, and when you kind of see the human toll of what's happening, for people that are disabled and maybe dependent on medication as well, the people that can't get outside, these conditions can be quite miserable. And I believe that the governor had addressed that today, is that as the days drag on and people don't have resources, this is going to be much more of a human story. Right now we're more fixated on debris and destruction and structural damage, so on and so forth. But understand that a good amount of humanity had to remain behind for this storm because they either chose to or they couldn't leave because of other circumstances out of their control. So we do have a good amount of people that are still within the region right now, either displaced or forced to stay where they are. And it's going to be a challenging few weeks because from what I've understood and heard, most of the estimates right now about power are dealing in weeks, not days. And for all of us who are waiting to get back to our families, waiting to understand what's going to happen to schools, much of this was already up in the air with COVID. But now you throw this element of what the storm is doing, and it just throws another loop of uncertainty on top of us. And quite honestly, for us, it's the last thing we needed because we were dealing already with just multiple stresses. And coming on the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, much of this was triggering for other people as well. So it's a troubling and tough time for people. And oddly, though, as we're going through, it is quite picturesque right now in some parts, as the sun is shining, which it usually does after the storm. If we can. I apologize, I'm trying to have multiple conversations with everyone. So, this is pretty much our mission right now, guys. We're on 90 trying to head to the West Bank, and as much as we can, we'll pull off and make our way to Algiers eventually. And we are just popped up here again. We just got into Harvey, and we apologize for the delay here. We felt that we didn't have much to offer in terms of commentary and what's going on, but we just arrived here in Harvey. For this crew at least, this is our first time in Harvey, and what we're trying to do is make our way through some of the communities on the west bank of both Orleans and Jefferson Parish. And greeting us here as we just came out of the Harvey Tunnel is a down power line and utility pole. And Jeff, we can keep moving here. And again, this is, for this crew, our first time in some of the communities on the west bank. And we understand that from some of the social media posts and some of the comments online that some of the areas of the West Bank in both Orleans and Jefferson parishes did get hit quite hard, and Plaquemines as well. And we're doing our best right now to get to some of those communities on the West Bank, including Belchase and Plaquemines Parish as well.
Manhattan's up here, if you want to take that.
Sure.
Main thoroughfare?
Yeah.
Or we can go down there. Let's just go down this way.
Yeah.
Maplewood.
We're heading down Maplewood. And remarkably, as we mentioned earlier before, everyone, what we're seeing here is pretty quick work from many people, whether they're neighbors and homeowners, and certainly some of the parish crews in the parishes as well. Some of these areas are remarkably clear of debris less than 24 hours after the storm. Testament to people wanting to recover from this and get back to a sense of what was before. But we're seeing many people right now, and what's getting to the point is that people are using and getting into their cars for air conditioning when they can. We have some people washing their cars as well. Not a bad idea now that the temperature is cooling off a little bit. Today has been a fairly warm day, clear day, which is usually the case after a storm moves through and blows through an area. And people certainly have taken advantage of that to clear some of the debris if their areas did suffer damage from the wind of Hurricane Ida. It doesn't look like this area suffered too much damage here because we don't see too much debris piled up anywhere. Certainly any of the trees chopped up and moved to the curb. Check 1 2. Hello. Yes, we're back up.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so we got this.
Yeah. Let's just wait. Let's just wait, and then we'll, whenever they take us. Well, let's just go. I mean, let's just roll. I mean, there's no point in waiting on this.
Should be some type of old folks home or something. Greater New Orleans Behavioral Hospital. Oh, this must be hot. No.
And if you're joining us here on digital, we're just entering the Belmead subdivision in Gretna right now. And so far, for the most part, just coming in from City Hall near Gretna, it doesn't seem to be a tremendous amount of damage, at least, or debris that we've seen so far. It could be a very good job on the residents' part and certainly the city's part in clearing out the debris, but we haven't seen a tremendous amount of cleanup here, but we haven't seen a heavy amount of damage. Trees, utility poles, so on and so forth.
Looks like
It's pretty sporadic.
power lines are underground.
Yeah. Jeff has pointed out probably that the power lines are underground here. But now we're starting to see some debris. But again, compared to certainly last night before any of the crews were able to come through, this is fairly minimal compared to what we saw, certainly compared to last night. There is some sporadic and random fence damage as well. And eventually, so just to catch you up, if you're joining us here, I'm Ton Trung, and along with Jeff Hackett from WWL-TV, we've been in the Mobile Forecast Center for the past couple of days, surveying some of the damage and trying to report on the impacts. We did so initially with the initial impact of Hurricane Ida yesterday, and now we're dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Ida. So we started in the Harahan area in Jefferson Parish and moved our way to the west bank of Jefferson Parish, and then eventually we're going to go into the west bank of Orleans Parish as well, to Algiers. We are now in the subdivision of the Belmead area of Gretna, and for the most part right now, most of the roads are clear, most of the neighborhoods are cleaned. So eventually we'll get back onto US 90 and head further west, and we'll try to, well, east actually at this point, head over to Algiers. Speaking strictly just for this crew, we haven't been to Algiers yet during this storm, so it'll be our first experience to kind of see what Hurricane Ida delivered in terms of damage and impacts for that part of Orleans Parish. But again, we are in the Belmead subdivision. People right now are unloading some gasoline. It looks like people have also removed some of their debris from the homes. But as you'll probably notice there, some folks are now sitting outside of their home because it is August in Louisiana. That can get quite miserable when you don't have power or any of the luxuries that it brings, including air conditioning. So as we head towards Algiers, I'll put the mic down for a little bit since there's not too much to describe at this point. The picture kind of explains itself. So if you've been watching this live stream here, we apologize for not being on it. For the most part, it seems that the West Bank of Orleans and Jefferson, at least the areas that we traveled, didn't seem to sustain that much damage. And if they did, most folks have done a remarkable job in clearing the debris. But we are trying to head to an area on Delaron Street in Algiers. We have a large tree. Let me kind of zoom into it. Let me punch up the other camera here so I can zoom in on that. Take a look at it here. It's blocking our way. We're going to try to find a route around here, but this is about the most significant damage that we've seen so far, at least in Algiers. I apologize for the poor camera work. This is not my expertise. But yes, I'm just going to put the mic on mute here, and we're just going to find our way around to this other area of Delaron Street in Algiers. For those of us who are still, or those of you who are still following us on streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and WWLTV.com, it seems that some of the damages that may have been sustained on the West Bank seem to be fairly minimal compared to what we've seen in other parts of the metro area, and certainly much less than what we saw further southwest of us. What we're going to do now is we're going to head back over to the East Bank of Orleans Parish, and we'll just survey some of the damages there, if they're just going to compare how people have been cleaning up since landfall yesterday. And again, when it merits, we'll get back on to describe what we're seeing, but keep in mind it is getting dark now, so we may not have a great amount of visibility. But again, we are going to make our way over to the East Bank as we've surveyed some of the damages on the West Bank, and we'll update you when we can. And if you're still with us on our streaming in terms of where we've traveled, we have now traveled from the West Bank of Orleans Parish and Jefferson parishes, and we are now back on the East Bank of Orleans Parish, and we're going to head over to the 9th Ward. We've taken you to several parts already, at least combining some of the coverage areas from yesterday into today. We haven't yet gone to the 9th Ward and Gentilly in those areas yet to kind of get a firmer sense of what the damage was done. But as you can probably tell, or maybe not because of the bright lights on the camera here, it is very dark right now without any of the lights. And even pre-Hurricane Ida, we had issues with lights in some of the areas being fairly dark in New Orleans. But when you take out the rest of the city without lights, it is quite eerie as we were driving across the Crescent City connection. And as we were coming in, and we saw the skyline of the city, and it was very dark, which is a very eerie sign. But right now we are driving, heading towards the 9th Ward, coming off the Crescent City connection. We're heading eastbound on the Pontchartrain Expressway. And when we get to some areas that need description, we'll do so.
Get off here.
And we're just coming off the Pontchartrain Expressway, and we're coming down a very, very dark North Claiborne Avenue, headed towards Elysian Fields Avenue. And it's quite eerie, we have to say. Very little light, and we're sporadically seeing police lights here and there, just marking the intersections. To an emergency, or if they're just here to kind of mark that territory so people understand that this is an intersection that they need to respect.
Help me out to see.
Yeah, so if you want to go, just hang a right here, Jeff. We'll just take St. Claude Avenue in instead of staying on North Robertson here, or Claiborne, yeah. We'll take St. Claude in, so hang a right here on Elysian Fields. Again, for anybody that's evacuated and also kind of wondering what night brings, it is very, very dark here without any of the utilities and resources that we're used to. And understand too, without electricity, we don't have air conditioning, and many people right now we probably have marked already on air, and I know that many people don't have access to television right now, that it is quite a challenge to get gas. And despite parish and city officials urging people not to drive around, we do see a good amount of vehicles in and around the areas that we've traveled so far. And we are on Elysian Fields approaching St. Claude Avenue eventually. And what we're trying to do is make our way down to the 9th Ward, the Marigny, Bywater as well. So we'll head down St. Claude just to kind of see what those neighborhoods took in terms of the damage from Hurricane Ida.
Left?
Yeah, eventually we'll cross over here, Jeff, and hang a left. Yes. Mm-hmm. And it might be hard to tell for locals here. We're turning around on Elysian Fields. It's a Starbucks, and then that's the Robert on St. Claude Avenue. And now we're heading eastbound on St. Claude Avenue. There might be some power lines up here near Jeff. And it is very dark here on St. Claude Avenue, as it is everywhere now that the sun has set.
This person passed me with the brakes.
And we're just pulling over to allow a fairly aggressive driver to get to wherever they need to be.
Can you switch to the other? Never mind, we're good.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And for this two-person crew, this is our first time in the 9th Ward since the storm. But it's only been roughly 24 hours or so since the hurricane made landfall in Louisiana. As we're crossing Franklin Avenue here, we're creeping up close to Bywater now. Jeff, at the tracks, let's hang a right if we can.
Before or after?
Right after. Right at the tracks. Right here. Hang a right here.
Right here?
Yeah, hang a right here.
See where the road is? Okay.
Yeah. So far, we haven't seen much debris in this area at the 9th Ward. It's a good sign, considering that there's parts of it that there will be in Bywater that are lined with trees. And we're going to head towards Dauphine, and when we get to Dauphine, we'll hang a left, Jeff, if we can. It'll be a little bumpy here from the construction, so watch yourself. Watch yourself here, Jeff. Yeah, stay on the right. Yeah. All right, Jeff, if we can hang a left here on Dauphine. This is B-Mike Studios here. This area, most people probably are familiar with his artwork. Slow down here, Jeff, for a minute. Let's give people a look around. looks like it's intact here, the studios on Dauphine Street. All right, Jeff, thank you. And let's proceed here. Coming up on our left is Blessed Savior Sealos Parish, the main parish here in Bywater. See how the church fared here. If you slow down here, Jeff, for a minute. Let's pan up. See how the church fared. Does it had any damage here? Doesn't look like it suffered any damage here so far, but it's hard to tell because it's fairly dark. I apologize for the shoddy camera work here. All right, Jeff, let's just roll down Dauphine and see what we see here in Bywater. It's very quiet, very dark. Not too many people out tonight in terms of what it used to be. Bywater is a fairly populated area, very popular with tourists. And so far, there's not major signs of damage here. And we are approaching, which is a popular spot in the neighborhood. Freddy's one-stop shop here on the left. And just, that'd be great. I'm just going to get off mic for just a second here.